Everyone, in this video, I want to provide an overview for your first major writing project, the rhetorical analysis. Much like the syllabus video, I'm not going to go over the entire assignment sheet, and you should definitely, hopefully you've already looked at that. If not, go look at the assignment sheet after you watch this video and kind of get more into the specifics. But first project is about looking at a web presence of a public business, an organization, or public figure, and then thinking about what kind of message and ethos they're trying to create or persona they're trying to create through that web presence, and then and think about whether it's effective or not. That's kind of the idea of a rhetorical analysis, is that you have an argument, something that's being argued for an audience, and then you're saying, well, how did they do that? And you break it down into individual elements, say, oh, it's working this way and not this way. And then you kind of ultimately come to a point about whether it's effective or not. And so what you're going to be doing is you'll pick this web presence, you're going to break it down. Think about it as a multimedia text. Usually if you're looking at something like a social media account, such as a Facebook or Twitter or Instagram account, right? These are multimedia spaces where you have video, you have is all kind of coming together in the same space to do different types of rhetorical work. If you're looking at a website, again, all those things and more could be at play. So you're thinking about it as a multimedia text, really kind of breaking down its structure, and you're thinking about who the audience or the audiences for this web presence are, persona or ethos is being created, and then the overall effectiveness. Does this account, web page, whatever, achieve its goal or not? So you might say, oh, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Lawrence Police Department Twitter account. It's pretty fantastic follow. It's an informative at the same time. And so you might look at them and say, well, this seems like an interesting case where you have a standard kind of public service organization creating more of an individual presence and identity, right? Kind of taking the serious nature of their work and making it more accessible. And so that might be a good starting point. And then you would go in and say, how are they doing that? Looking at individual tweets, kind of breaking that all down, things like that. So the goal of this paper, and you'll notice there's a question in italics on the assignment sheet that you're ultimately answering in your paper. And that is, how does the public business organization figures web presence successfully engage its target audience or not? A lot of people tend to take this project and look at, say, oh, but I've also had really successful papers that kind of break something down and say it's, this person or this organization is totally missing the point. That what to do, what not to do section for the paper on the assignment sheet, and I definitely suggest looking at that. Because this is a rhetorical analysis, your job is to down what is happening. You're not engaging with the content. So that you agree with or disagree with, honestly, I don't care for this paper, and we really shouldn't know that in a rhetorical analysis. For other arguments, absolutely, and other assignments. But for this one, your goal is to be an objective observer here as much as possible. What are they trying to do? Who's their audience for this? And are they succeeding at it or not? So this means that you shouldn't be arguing about specific content. You shouldn't be agreeing or disagreeing with particular posts. You shouldn't kind of get off on a tangent where somebody has a post about something and you kind of go, oh, this is really interesting, and get away from the actual point of analyzing the web presence. You want to stay focused on the web presence. Make sure you're breaking them down and showing us how they are doing this work. Also, because you're remaining objective in this assignment, for the rhetorical analysis, you want to really avoid any use of first or second person at all possible, because the moment you start bringing in I or even you, it makes your analysis seem more biased and less objective than you want it to be. Now, one of the biggest things that people struggle with, because it's difficult, is making sure that you show and don't just tell people about the rhetorical effectiveness of individual elements. And what that means is you should be looking at each of the rhetorical appeals, which you'll learn about more throughout this first unit: ethos, pathos, logos, and kairos, and say, how are these being put to work through this web presence? So how is this web presence establishing credibility with its audience? To say, well, look, they have a professional photo. That's credibility. it's much harder to say, oh, this professional photo presents somebody who's clearly put together, they're established, they have the money, to kind of support such a thing or something like that, right? They really understand who their audience is. So it's much more difficult to show people and really explain how an example is doing that rhetorical work than just say, oh, there's ethos, there's kairos, there's pathos. So you want to make sure you're doing that. And that's the biggest thing usually is that a first drafts will result in a lot of description and kind of some general identification and gesturing towards the rhetorical appeals, but not a ton of analysis. So you want to make sure that you are not just telling us these things are, ethos, pathos, but you're showing us, you're explaining it to us. So you want to make sure that you're touching on each of the rhetorical appeals. If you notice that there is a lack of one, you want to talk about that, right? Does this impact an account or not, or a web presence or not? In some cases, a celebrity trying to just kind of be accessible for their audience, maybe a lack of logic isn't a big deal. But a politician running for office, logic is a pretty big deal, right? We should see evidence there, supporting their claims and things like that. So you also want to think about kind of the nature of the site you're looking at. If you're looking at a website, what is there? What do we see and what do we not see? On Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, what is it that people have control of? Because they aren't able to, you can't change the layout of a Facebook page, but you can change the content. You can, control what you post and things like that. So how are they using what they can to make an effective argument or not? So you want to make sure that you're not just describing, but you're analyzing the web page. So look at it, and that's fine. But we shouldn't just be kind of thick description saying, oh, here's how it looks and here's what's there. Now, you are, and this often comes up. Let's say you're looking at a celebrity's Facebook page, and there's a lot of users who have commented. You shouldn't bring in individual users' comments from a social media site. Even if it's a public space, they may not have expected when they commented on Justin Bieber's Twitter account that it would suddenly show up in a paper at Washburn. So you can generally kind of talk about the feedback and say, oh, so-and-so, made this post. There were 7 million responses. They were overwhelmingly positive, right? So it kind of did a good job. That's fine. Now, if celebrities are talking to other celebrities or, other politicians are engaging with other public figures, I usually say that's okay, but you mainly want to stay focused on the account or the presence of the organization you're looking at. So in terms of if you're looking at a social media account, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, for this assignment, you've got about a little over a 6.5 month window. So you can really go back as far as kind of June 1st, 2017 in terms of the content to analyze for this paper. But beyond that, you're kind of getting away from stuff that's recent. So in terms of the length of this paper, the body of the paper needs to be 1,500 words minimum, max of 2,000 words. Now, the word count does not include things like the title, the MLA header, the works cited page for against your word count. So I just ignore them and look only at the body of the paper for the word count. And the reason for a word count is not just because I like to see you in pain. I don't. But the reality is that to do this assignment, to do it well, it should be in that range. You should be having about 1,500 words of content. So if you've written 1,000 words and you're like, I have no idea where to go, that's something you want to think about. Again, you can always come talk to me. You can always have an appointment to chat online or email me if you have questions. But if you want to think about making sure you have enough content for the assignment. And that's important, as I'll come back to in a minute when we get to the stage of the peer review. So the paper should be in 12-point Times New Roman or Calibri font, double space, 1-inch margins on all sides. It should be in MLA 8th edition documentation. You should have MLA 8th edition in-text citations and an MLA 8th edition works cited page. If you get the most recent version of the textbook with the MLA 2016 update, that'll have the guidelines in there. I've got several resources online as well to kind of help with that. I also ask for this paper that you have at least 3 outside sources to help kind of provide context. and background on the business, organization, public figure you're looking at. Um, also, and some people do might use them to kind of fact check particular claims and back up elements there. So you do need to make sure that the sources you are pulling on are credible and informative. So you should be able to kind of determine where the information is coming from and see that as legitimate, and make sure it's actually relevant and related to what you're talking about. These are really meant not. It should be used very lightly in this paper. Really, probably only one quote or paraphrase from each source. Really, just kind of give a little bit more context and understanding for who it is or what it is you're looking at. So you should only send a brief in the paper. There shouldn't be any block quotes, any lengthy quoting. And for this paper, you want to avoid opinion pieces, encyclopedia entries, the other social media presences. So if you're doing the Facebook page for Walmart, you can't look at their website, you can't look at their Twitter account, anything like that. So breakdown for the assignment, I mentioned in the intro video for the course that every major writing project is based around process work. So this first assignment, you'll notice that there are several elements. So you will submit a topic paragraph to me, and that's going to be 10 points of your grade. The full draft, as I mentioned already, that's got to be at least 1,500 words, and that's 15 points of your grade. And then when you submit the final draft, 50% is content, and that should tell you that what I care about most in projects is what you're saying. You can have a well-written, pretty paper that's edited and clean and says nothing. Very much. So you need to make sure that you're saying a lot in your analysis. So that's why content is the single biggest element on all of the major writing projects. There are 10 points as well towards organization. So making sure this kind of goes hand in hand with content, not just that you have good ideas, but it's presented well, that you transition your reader from one idea to the next. You have clear topic sentences, things like that. 10 points for MLA formatting for this paper, pretty straightforward. Works cited page, a couple in-text citations, the basic formatting of the paper, and then 5 points for grammar mechanics. So for grammar mechanics, I'm not a stickler. I'm not going to kind of pull out each individual, missed comma or anything like that and knock you off for that. But if there are significant errors, if it's clear you didn't take time to edit, proofread your paper before submitting, if there is something that, a mistake that is kind of happening time and time again, you will probably lose some points for that along the way. So as I mentioned, there's also a work day for the draft before the draft is due. So you'll have one day that is devoted just to working on the draft. And then after the peer reviews, you will have another day that is devoted particularly to revision and kind of thinking about taking the feedback you got, incorporate that in your draft before you submit the final draft. And just a little bit about kind of the way I grade the papers. I won't look at your draft unless you want to set up a meeting to go over it with me during the process. Once you turn in your final, well, I will look at it just to make sure it meets the length guidelines, that you've got everything you need to, but I won't be providing specific feedback on the full draft. So you'll get feedback from your classmates in the peer review, and then you have the opportunity to make revisions. And if you want to meet with me, you can, but that's not required. But once you turn in the final draft, I will grade that, and you'll get both text or actually not in text comments. I'm doing something differently this semester. You'll be getting an audio file from me with particular feedback about your draft, your topic, things like that. Feedback from the rubric, which is included on the D2L page. And so that'll kind of give you an idea about, why you got the grade you did. And I'm always glad to talk more about your paper after that. But it doesn't stop there, because you will be turning in a final portfolio at the end of the semester, as I talked about, and is outlined on the syllabus. And so you have the opportunity for the final portfolio to rework each of your major writing projects and revise them again. So you'll get my feedback after you complete the rhetorical analysis. And then you can go back and say, maybe if you're happy with that grade, great. If you're not, you'll have the opportunity to revise it, submit it for the final portfolio. And not only will that contribute towards your final portfolio grade, but it can also boost up on the rhetorical analysis itself. Now, as I'll get to later in the semester when we talk about the final portfolio, whether it boosts your grade up or not is dependent on the quality of your revision. So if you change 2 minor errors and don't address any of the content issues, that's not going to do too much. But if you make significant revisions, it can definitely boost up your grade. So again, I'm glad to meet with you during the process, but you won't necessarily get my feedback until after you turn in that final draft. So the due dates are all laid out on D2L, so definitely check those out. The only other thing I want to talk about is selecting a topic for this paper. So it's pretty open-ended. It's up to you. There are just kind of 3 things you need to keep in mind, and it's on the last page of the assignment sheet, is that the profile or the web presence you choose needs to be the profile of a public business, organization, or figure, which means they need to be public. They need to have an audience. Can't be your grandma, your best friend, unless your best friend is Justin Bieber. So you need to make sure that this is kind of a public, open organization, group, something like that. You need to make sure it's the official page for that group too. It's not fake Twitter accounts, even on Facebook. There's a difference between kind of fan pages and the official account of a band, a politician, whatever. So you need to make sure it's the official page. And then the third thing is you need to make sure there's actually enough content there between June 1st, 2017 and now to analyze in your paper. And occasionally that somebody finds a web presence and they're really interested in there's 2 posts the past 6 months and there's not really much for them to talk about in their paper. So you want to make sure the topic that you've got the content there as well. So there are some outline topics on the assignment sheet, but you are not by any means expected to pull off of that. Ideally a web presence that they're interested in analyzing and breaking down. So if you have any questions along the way, you want to meet with me and talk about a draft, anything like that, please let me know. I'm glad to help out with that. Board on D2L for just general questions. You can always post questions there about the rhetorical analysis. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what you all choose as your topics and what you come up with for this paper.